The train lurched to a stop at Fort Bowie station, and Helena Zimmerman pressed her gloved hand against the frosted window, her breath forming clouds in the December air as fear coiled tight around her heart like barbed wire. She had traveled from Boston for 3 weeks to reach this desolate Arizona territory, following the promises in letters from a man named Gerald Hutchins, who claimed he needed a wife to help run his mercantile store. Helena had no family left after the fever took her parents and younger brother 2 years ago, and the sewing factory where she worked paid barely enough to keep her in a cramped boarding house room. Marriage to a stranger seemed less frightening than dying alone in that gray industrial city. But now, stepping off the train into the bitter cold of an Arizona winter evening in 1883, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. The platform was nearly empty. Most passengers had departed at earlier stops, and the few remaining travelers hurried toward the warmth of the nearby hotel. Helena clutched her worn carpetbag and scanned the faces of the men waiting, searching for someone who matched Gerald's description from his letters. He had written that he was 35, of medium height, with brown hair and a respectable appearance. None of the 3 men on the platform fit that description. She waited as the minutes stretched, the cold seeping through her thin wool coat. This coat had been adequate for Boston autumns, but proved pitiful against the sharp wind that whipped across the Arizona high desert. Fort Bowie sat at over 4,000 feet elevation, and winter here brought temperatures that plummeted below freezing once the sun set. Helena shivered, watching her breath crystallize in the dim light from the station lanterns. After nearly half an hour, she approached the station master, an older gentleman with spectacles and kind eyes. "Excuse me, sir. I am looking for Gerald Hutchins. He was supposed to meet me here this evening." The station master's expression shifted from friendly to uncomfortable. "Miss, are you the mail-order bride from back east?" "I am Helena Zimmerman, yes. Mr. Hutchins and I have been corresponding for several months." The man removed his spectacles and cleaned them slowly, clearly stalling. "I am very sorry to be the one to tell you this, Miss Zimmerman, but Gerald Hutchins passed away 6 days ago. Heart gave out suddenly while he was unloading supplies. The whole town attended his funeral 3 days past." The world seemed to tilt beneath Helena's feet. She gripped the edge of the ticket counter to steady herself. "He is dead? I am afraid so, miss. Real tragedy. He was a good man, well liked in town." Helena's mind raced. She had exactly $7.32 in her reticule, the last of her savings after purchasing the train ticket. She had no family, no friends, no position waiting for her anywhere. She had given up her room at the boarding house and her job at the factory. There was nothing to return to in Boston, and no money to get there even if she wanted to. "Is there a hotel where I might stay tonight?" she asked, forcing her voice to remain steady. "The Fort Bowie Hotel is just down the main road. Mrs. Patterson runs it. She is a decent woman, but I must warn you, a room costs 50 cents a night." At that rate, Helena could afford 2 weeks if she spent nothing on food. Then what? She thanked the station master and stepped back out into the cold evening, pulling her inadequate coat tighter around her shoulders. The town of Fort Bowie was small, built primarily to serve the nearby military fort that gave it its name. The main street consisted of perhaps 20 buildings: a hotel, 2 saloons, a general store, a blacksmith, a livery stable, a church, and various other establishments. Warm light spilled from windows, and Helena could hear piano music drifting from one of the saloons. She walked toward the hotel, her feet numb in her button-up boots, fear rising with each step. What would become of her? A single woman alone in a frontier town with almost no money and no prospects. She could try to find work, But what positions were available for women here? Domestic service, perhaps, or laundry work. The thought of approaching strangers to beg for employment made her stomach clench with anxiety. She was so lost in her worried thoughts that she did not notice the patch of ice on the wooden sidewalk until her foot slipped. She cried out, arms windmilling as she pitched forward. Her carpetbag flew from her hand, and she braced herself for a painful collision with the frozen ground. Instead, strong hands caught her, steadying her with firm but gentle pressure. "Easy there, miss. I have got you." Helena looked up into the face of her rescuer and found herself staring at the most striking man she had ever seen. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders evident even beneath his heavy sheepskin coat. His face was lean and weathered, with high cheekbones and a strong jaw. But it was his eyes that captured her attention, pale blue like winter ice, framed by dark lashes and radiating both strength and kindness. His hair was dark brown, slightly too long, curling at the collar of his coat. He appeared to be in his late 20s, perhaps 28 or 29. "Thank you," Helena managed, acutely aware that his hands were still on her arms, supporting her. "I did not see the ice. Weather has been bitter this week. Everything freezes over once the sun goes down." He released her gently and retrieved her fallen carpetbag. "You are not from around here." It was a statement rather than a question. Helena fought the urge to cry. "No, I arrived on the evening train from Boston. That is a long journey." He handed her the bag, studying her face with those remarkable eyes. "Are you visiting family in Fort Bowie?" "I was supposed to marry Gerald Hutchins, but the station master just informed me that he died last week." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "I have nowhere to go and almost no money, and I do not know what I am going to do." She pressed her hand to her mouth, mortified that she had revealed so much to a complete stranger. But there was something in his steady gaze that made her feel less alone, less terrified. His expression softened with sympathy. "I heard about Gerald's passing." "That is a hard situation to find yourself in, miss." "Helena Zimmerman," she said softly. "Logan Irwin," he replied, touching the brim of his hat. "I run a cattle ranch about 5 miles north of town. Miss Zimmerman, you are shivering something fierce. Let me buy you a hot meal at the hotel restaurant, and we can talk about your situation." Helena knew she should be cautious. She had heard stories about unscrupulous men who preyed on vulnerable women. But she was cold and hungry and frightened, and Logan Irwin had kind eyes. More than that, his offer seemed genuine without any hint of improper suggestion. "I could not impose," she said, though her stomach growled at the thought of hot food. "It is no imposition. Come on now before you freeze solid." He offered his arm in a courtly gesture that reminded Helena of gentlemen from an earlier era. She accepted it gratefully, and they walked together to the hotel. The warmth that hit her when they entered the building was so intense it almost hurt. Logan guided her to a table in the small restaurant area and helped her remove her thin coat. "That coat would not keep a kitten warm in this weather," he observed. "How long were you standing at the station?" "Perhaps 45 minutes." He muttered something under his breath that might have been a curse, then signaled to the woman behind the counter. "Mrs. Patterson, could we get 2 bowls of whatever you have hot and coffee for the lady? Make it strong and sweet, Mrs." Patterson was a stout woman in her 50s with graying hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. She looked at Helena with open curiosity but nodded. "I have beef stew and fresh biscuits. The stew is good tonight." "Perfect," Logan said. As they waited for the food, Helena tried to regain her composure. She removed her gloves with fingers that still trembled from the cold and studied the man across from her. Logan Irwin had the bearing of someone accustomed to hard work and responsibility. His hands were calloused but clean, his clothes well worn but well maintained. Everything about him spoke of competence and reliability. "You said you run a cattle ranch," she asked, desperate to focus on something other than her dire circumstances. "The Double Bar I Ranch. My father started it 20 years ago, and I took over when he passed 3 years back. It is not the biggest spread in the territory, but we run about 800 head of cattle and have good water rights. I have a few hired hands who help with the work." "That sounds like a substantial operation. It keeps me busy." He paused as Mrs. Patterson brought their coffee. "Miss Zimmerman, I do not mean to pry, but what were your plans before you learned about Gerald's death?" Helena wrapped her hands around the warm cup, grateful for the heat. "Mr. Hutchins and I had been corresponding for 4 months. He wrote that he needed a wife to help run his mercantile and to provide companionship. I was working in a sewing factory in Boston, but after my family died, I had no real ties there. Marriage to Mr. Hutchins seemed like an opportunity for a better life." "Did you know much about him?" "Only what he wrote in his letters. He seemed intelligent and kind. He never made any inappropriate suggestions. He sent money for half my train ticket, which I thought was generous." She took a sip of the coffee, wincing at its strength but appreciating the warmth spreading through her body. "I know it was foolish to travel so far to marry a stranger, but I had few options." "It was not foolish," Logan said firmly. "Plenty of women come west as mail-order brides and find good lives here. You had no way of knowing what would happen." The stew arrived, and Helena ate slowly, trying not to reveal how desperately hungry she was. The food was simple but delicious, rich with beef and vegetables, and the biscuits were fluffy and golden. She could feel strength returning to her body with each bite. Logan ate his own meal but kept his attention on her. "What kind of work did you do at the factory?" "I was a seamstress. I made shirts for men, the same pattern over and over, 12 hours a day. Before my parents died, my mother taught me fine needlework. I can do embroidery, lacework, mending, alterations. I made all my own clothes." She gestured at her dress, which was plain but well cut, with neat stitching visible at the seams. "That is skilled work." "It is work I enjoy, at least the fine needlework. The factory was less pleasant." She set down her spoon, having cleaned the bowl. "Mr. Irwin, you have been very kind, but I must face my situation honestly. I need to find employment quickly. Do you know if anyone in town might need a seamstress or a domestic servant?" Logan was quiet for a long moment, his blue eyes studying her thoughtfully. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "Miss Zimmerman, I have a proposal that might solve both our problems, though I want you to understand there is no pressure whatsoever. If you say no, I will help you find other arrangements." Helena's heart began to beat faster. "What kind of proposal?" "I have been looking for a housekeeper for the ranch for 6 months. The work is hard, I will not lie about that. Cooking for myself and 4 ranch hands, cleaning, laundry, mending. In the spring, when we do the roundup and branding, there might be additional men to cook for. I can offer you room and board in a separate cabin on the property, plus $30 a month in wages." "That is good money for this area." Helena stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. $30 a month was more than she had made at the factory, and room and board besides. It seemed too generous. "Why would you make such an offer to a complete stranger?" she asked bluntly. Logan respected her directness. "Because I need help and you need work. I am a good judge of character, Miss Zimmerman. I can see you are educated and well-mannered. You have good skills. You are willing to travel 3 weeks across the country to build a new life, which tells me you have courage. I think you would be a good worker." He paused. and because I know what it is like to be alone in a hard situation. When my father died, several people in this town helped me when they did not have to. I believe in returning that kindness when I can. There had to be a catch. Mr. Irwin, I must ask you directly. Are you expecting anything beyond housekeeping duties? His expression turned serious. Absolutely not. You would have your own cabin with a lock on the door. Your person would be entirely safe. I would never presume anything inappropriate. You would be my employee, nothing more. If any of my ranch hands showed you disrespect, they would be dismissed immediately. I give you my word on that. Helena searched his face for any sign of deception and found none. Logan Irwin met her gaze steadily, his winter blue eyes clear and honest. She thought about her alternatives. Spending her meager savings on a hotel room while desperately searching for work in a town where she knew no one, or accepting this offer from a man who seemed honorable but was still a stranger. I would want to see the cabin before I agree, she said finally. Of course. It is too dark and cold tonight, but we could ride out first thing tomorrow morning. You can inspect the accommodations, meet the ranch hands, and decide if the situation suits you. I will pay for your hotel room tonight regardless of your decision. That is very generous. It is only right. He signaled Mrs. Patterson over. Could you set Miss Zimmerman up with a room for the night? Put it on my account. Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose with interest, but she nodded. Of course, Logan. Miss Zimmerman, if you will follow me, I will show you to a room. Helena stood and Logan rose as well. She extended her hand to him. Thank you, Mr. Irwin, for the meal and the room and the job offer. You have been extraordinarily kind to someone you do not know. He took her hand gently, his calloused palm warm against hers. Fear has no place with me, Miss Zimmerman. If you come work at the Double Bar Eye, you will be safe and treated with respect. That is my promise to you. Something in the way he said it, with such quiet conviction, made the tight knot of fear in Helena's chest loosen slightly. For the first time since the station master had delivered his terrible news, she felt like she might survive this disaster. I look forward to seeing the ranch tomorrow, she said softly. Logan touched his hat brim. I will come by at 8 o'clock with a wagon to take you out there. Sleep well, Miss Zimmerman. Helena followed Mrs. Patterson upstairs to a small but clean room with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the main street. After the landlady left, Helena sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process everything that had happened in the past few hours. She had arrived in Fort Bowie expecting to meet her future husband and instead learned he was dead. She had been rescued from a fall by a handsome rancher who had offered her a job that seemed almost too good to be true. Tomorrow she would visit his ranch and decide whether to accept his offer. Fear has no place with me. Logan's words echoed in her mind. She wanted desperately to believe them. Helena prepared for bed, washing with the cold water in the pitcher and changing into her nightgown. She knelt beside the bed and said the prayers her mother had taught her, adding a special one for guidance. Then she climbed beneath the quilts and let exhaustion pull her into sleep. Morning came with pale winter sunlight streaming through the window. Helena woke to the sounds of Fort Bowie coming to life. Horses on the street, voices calling out greetings, the ring of the blacksmith's hammer. She dressed in her best day dress, a deep blue wool with black trim that her mother had helped her make 3 years ago. It was the warmest dress she owned, though still inadequate for this climate. She went downstairs to find the restaurant area serving breakfast. Mrs. Patterson brought her coffee and eggs without being asked. So you are the mail-order bride who was supposed to marry poor Gerald, the woman said without preamble. That is a sorry situation. Yes, madam, it was quite a shock. I am sure it was. Mrs. Patterson refilled her coffee cup. Logan Irwin told me he offered you a job at his ranch. Word traveled fast in small towns. Helena nodded. I am going to see the property this morning before I decide. Logan is a good man, Mrs. Patterson said firmly. Honest, hardworking, treats people fairly. His ranch is well run and his hired hands are decent fellows. If you are worried about propriety, do not be. Logan would never compromise a woman's reputation. His mother raised him right before she passed. God rest her soul. Thank you for telling me that. Of course, if you do take the job, people will talk. They always do. But anyone with sense will see it is a legitimate business arrangement. You just hold your head high and ignore the gossips. At exactly 8 o'clock, Logan arrived with a sturdy wagon pulled by 2 draft horses. He helped Helena up to the seat, and she noticed he had brought several heavy blankets. The ride takes about 45 minutes, he explained, tucking a blanket around her. It will be cold, but these should help. They set off north from town, following a well-worn road that cut through the high desert landscape. The scenery was unlike anything Helena had seen before. Instead of the endless flatness she had expected, the land rolled and rose, dotted with scrub brush, juniper trees, and tall saguaro cacti. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks dusted with snow. The sky was a brilliant blue, endless and clear. It is beautiful, Helena said, surprised. I thought Arizona would be nothing but sand and emptiness. Most people think that, Logan replied, but the high desert has its own beauty. In spring, wildflowers cover the hills. In summer, the monsoons bring rain and everything turns green. Winter is harsh, but I have always liked the clarity of it. Everything seems sharper in the cold. He pointed out landmarks as they rode. A distinctive rock formation that marked the boundary of his property, a creek bed that ran year-round with good water, the distant line of cottonwood trees that indicated his ranch headquarters. How long have you lived here? Helena asked. All my life. My father brought my mother here in 1863, right after they married. I was born the following year. It was rougher country then. The Apache were still fighting and there was no town to speak of. My parents built everything from scratch. That must have been difficult for your mother. She was strong. She had to be. My father loved this land, but ranch life is hard on everyone, especially women. My mother died when I was 23. Pneumonia took her one bad winter. His voice was quiet with old grief. My father never really recovered. He lasted 3 more years, but his heart was not in it anymore. I am sorry. Losing your parents is hard. You lost your whole family, Logan said gently. That is harder still. They rode in companionable silence for a while. Helena found herself studying Logan from the corner of her eye. In the clear morning light, she could see details she had missed the night before. The small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners as if he smiled often, the strong hands that held the reins with practiced ease. He was a very handsome man, though she suspected he had no idea of the fact. The ranch headquarters came into view as they crested a low rise. Helena caught her breath at the sight. The main house was a long, low structure built of adobe and wood, with a covered porch running along the front. Smoke rose from the chimney. Nearby stood a large barn, several corrals, a bunkhouse for the hands, and various outbuildings. Everything was well maintained, the fences straight and sturdy, the buildings in good repair. About 100 yards from the main house, separated by a stand of cottonwood trees, sat a smaller cabin. Logan drove the wagon directly to the small cabin and helped Helena down. This would be yours, he said, opening the door. The cabin consisted of 2 rooms. A main living area with a fireplace, small kitchen area, table and chairs, and a comfortable-looking armchair, and a bedroom with a bed, wardrobe, and washstand. The floors were wood, the walls whitewashed adobe. Everything was clean and neat, though clearly the space had not been used recently. "It is not fancy," Logan said, "but it is solid. The roof does not leak, the fireplace draws well, and the door has a good lock. I will provide firewood and any furnishings you need. The main house has a better kitchen for cooking meals for everyone, but you can prepare your own meals here if you prefer privacy." Helena walked through the room slowly, examining everything. The cabin was simple but comfortable, far nicer than her boarding house room in Boston had been. She tested the lock on the door and found it sturdy. The windows had real glass, not just shutters, and the bed had a thick mattress. "This is very nice, Mr. Irwin." "Good. Let me show you the main house." They walked across the yard, and Helena noticed 4 men working near the barn, mending tack and performing other chores. They looked up with obvious curiosity as Logan and Helena passed. "I will introduce you properly if you decide to take the position," Logan said. The main house was larger inside than it appeared from outside. The kitchen was spacious with a good cast iron stove, ample counter space, and shelves stocked with basic supplies. The main room had a large fireplace, comfortable furniture, and built-in bookcases filled with volumes. Helena noticed several books on ranching, but also poetry, history, and fiction. "You like to read," she observed. "It is one of my few relaxations. Do you read?" "Yes. I had to sell most of my books before I left Boston, but I managed to keep a few." She had 3 precious volumes in her carpet bag: a collection of Emerson's essays, a volume of poetry, and a novel by Charles Dickens. "You are welcome to borrow anything from my library." The rest of the house consisted of 3 bedrooms and a small office. Everything was tidy but had the slightly neglected air of a space maintained by men who did their best but lacked a woman's touch. Helena could see dust on the shelves and cobwebs in the corners. The windows needed washing. The curtains were sturdy but plain. "I have been doing my own cooking and cleaning," Logan said, sounding a bit embarrassed. "The men take care of the bunkhouse themselves, but I provide their meals. I am a decent cook, but it takes time away from ranch work and the place could use proper attention." Helena made mental notes. The house needed a thorough cleaning, but it had good bones. The kitchen was well equipped. She could manage this work and even enjoy it. It would be infinitely better than the factory. They returned to the main room and Logan gestured for her to sit. He took a chair across from her, his expression serious. "Before you decide, I want to be completely honest about what the job entails. You would be expected to prepare 3 meals a day for 5 men, sometimes more during busy seasons. That means being up by 5 to make breakfast. Cleaning and laundry for the main house and my personal quarters, though the hands do their own laundry in the bunkhouse. Mending and sewing as needed. The work is steady and can be exhausting. I am accustomed to hard work, Mr. Irwin. I have no doubt, but there are other considerations. We are 5 miles from town, which means you would not be able to visit often, especially in winter when the roads are bad. It can be lonely. And as Mrs. Patterson probably told you, people will talk. A single woman living on a ranch with 5 unmarried men will cause gossip, no matter how proper the arrangement." "I am not concerned with gossip," Helena said firmly. "I am concerned with survival. Your offer provides me with employment, housing, and fair wages. That is more than I could hope to find elsewhere, especially on such short notice." Logan nodded slowly. "All right then. I want you to understand one more thing. You will be treated with complete respect here. The men who work for me are good people, but if any of them ever makes you uncomfortable, you tell me immediately. Your cabin will be your private space. No one enters without your permission. You are free to come and go as you please. though I would appreciate knowing if you plan to go to town so I can ensure you have safe transportation. That seems very fair. I also want to be clear that this is a working arrangement, nothing more. I am not looking for a wife or a romantic entanglement. I hired you as my housekeeper, and that is how I will treat you. He said it kindly but firmly, establishing boundaries. Helena felt a small flutter of disappointment that surprised her, but she pushed it aside. She had no business thinking of Logan Irwin in romantic terms. She needed this job, and she would not complicate matters with foolish feelings. I understand completely, Mr. Irwin. I am looking for employment, not a husband. Given what happened with Mr. Hutchins, I am quite finished with that particular idea for the foreseeable future. Good. Then, if you are willing, I would like to offer you the position officially. $30 a month, room and board, Sundays off unless there is an emergency. You can start immediately if you wish, or take a few days to settle yourself. Helena thought about her dwindling funds and the cost of the hotel. I can start today if you will give me time to move my belongings from the hotel. Of course. We can head back to town now, collect your things, and return before lunch. I will introduce you to the men, and you can decide how you want to organize your work. They shook hands on the agreement, and Helena felt the tightness in her chest ease considerably. She had a job, a place to live, and a future that extended beyond the next 2 weeks. It was more than she had dared hope for when she stepped off the train yesterday. The ride back to Fort Bowie seemed shorter. Logan talked more easily now that business was settled, pointing out more features of the landscape and telling her about the ranch operations. Helena learned that spring roundup would begin in March, that they sold cattle to buyers who drove the herds to market, that water management was the constant challenge of desert ranching. At the hotel, Helena packed her few belongings quickly. She had brought little from Boston: 2 other dresses, a skirt and shirtwaist, a nightgown, undergarments, a few personal items, and her 3 books. Everything fit in her carpetbag and a small trunk. Logan carried the trunk down to the wagon while Helena settled her account with Mrs. Patterson. "You are going through with it then," the older woman said. "Yes. Mr. Irwin has been very kind and I need the work." Mrs. Patterson nodded approvingly. "You have a good head on your shoulders, girl. Do not let the gossips bother you. Anyone with sense knows Logan is honorable." By late morning, they were back at the ranch. Logan helped Helena carry her belongings to the cabin and built a fire in the fireplace to warm the rooms. Then he took her to meet the ranch hands. The 4 men gathered near the barn, clearly curious about their new cook and housekeeper. Logan made introductions. "Miss Zimmerman, these are my men. Thomas Garrett has been with me for 5 years. He is my foreman and the best horseman in the territory." Thomas was a lean man in his 40s with graying hair and a weathered face. He touched his hat politely. "Daniel Murphy handles the blacksmithing and general repairs." Daniel was younger, perhaps 30, with red hair and a friendly smile. "James Chen takes care of the horses and works with Thomas on cattle operations." James was of Chinese descent, a slim man in his mid-30s with intelligent eyes. "And Samuel Brooks is our newest hand, been here about 6 months. Samuel was the youngest, probably close to Helena's own age of 22, with sandy brown hair and an eager expression. "Gentlemen," Helena said, meeting each man's eyes in turn, "I am pleased to meet you. I hope my cooking and housekeeping will meet your standards. Madam, if you can cook anything better than Logan's attempts, we will be thrilled," Daniel said with a grin. "No offense, boss," Logan laughed. "None taken. It is true, my cooking is nothing to brag about. All right, men, back to work. Miss Zimmerman, I will let you settle in. Supper is usually around 6. No pressure for tonight, we can make do, but if you are willing to start tomorrow, we would appreciate it. I can manage supper tonight, Helena said. If you will show me where everything is in the kitchen, I can prepare something simple. Logan looked relieved. That would be wonderful. They spent an hour going through the kitchen, with Logan showing her where supplies were kept, explaining what provisions they had on hand, and answering her questions. Helena made mental notes about what was needed. The pantry was adequately stocked with basics: flour, cornmeal, dried beans, salt pork, coffee, sugar, and various canned goods. There were also potatoes, onions, and winter vegetables stored in a cool cellar. We butcher our own beef, so there is always fresh meat in winter, Logan explained. In summer, we use the smokehouse to preserve it. We get eggs from the chickens in that coop behind the barn. There is a root cellar for storing vegetables. Once a month or so, I go to town for supplies that we cannot produce ourselves. Helena felt more confident as she assessed the situation. This was work she could do well. By mid-afternoon, she had a fire going in the kitchen stove and had started preparing supper. Beef stew with vegetables, cornbread, and dried apple pie for dessert. Logan came in as she worked, carrying more firewood. "You did not have to start cooking tonight," he said. "I know you have had a long couple of days. I prefer to keep busy. It helps me not to think too much." Helena rolled out pie crust with efficient movements. "Besides, you and your men need to eat properly. That smells incredible already." Logan set the firewood in the box by the stove. "Is there anything you need? More eggs would be good, and I noticed you are low on lard. Also, that stove could use a thorough cleaning. I will do it tomorrow. I will get the eggs. Make a list of anything else you need, and I will pick it up next time I go to town." That evening, the 5 men gathered around the dining table while Helena served supper. The appreciation on their faces as they tasted her cooking was deeply gratifying. Even simple stew was a vast improvement over Logan's bachelor efforts. "Miss Zimmerman, this is the best meal we have had in months," Thomas said sincerely. "Maybe years." "It is only stew," Helena said, but she smiled. "It is delicious stew," Samuel added, "and this cornbread is perfect." They ate with enthusiasm, and Helena found herself enjoying their company. The men were respectful, treating her with the same courtesy they would show any respectable woman. Conversation flowed easily, ranging from ranch business to local news to good-natured teasing. Helena learned that Thomas had a sweetheart in town, that Daniel wanted to save enough money to start his own blacksmith business someday, that James sent most of his wages to his mother in San Francisco, and that Samuel was the youngest son of a large family in Texas who had come west looking for adventure. After the meal, the men thanked her profusely and returned to the bunkhouse for the evening. Logan helped Helena clear the dishes, despite her protests. "You cooked. I can at least help clean up," he said. "Besides, we need to establish the routine. You should not be working until all hours." They washed dishes together in companionable silence. Helena was acutely aware of Logan's presence beside her, the warmth of his body in the cooling kitchen, the easy competence with which he moved. She reminded herself sternly that he was her employer, nothing more. "Miss Zimmerman," Logan said as they finished, "I want to thank you for taking this position. I realize it is not what you expected when you came to Fort Bowie, but I believe it will work out well for both of us." "I hope so, Mr. Irwin. Thank you for giving me this opportunity." "I should walk you back to your cabin. It is dark and the footing can be tricky." Logan lit a lantern and accompanied her across the yard to the small cabin. He waited while she unlocked the door and lit her own lamp. "Sleep well," he said. "If you need anything during the night, do not hesitate to knock on the main house. I am a light sleeper. I will be fine. Good night, Mr. Irwin." Good night, Miss Zimmerman. Helena closed and locked the door, then stood in the middle of her new home, letting the reality sink in. Less than 24 hours ago, she had stood on the Fort Bowie station platform, terrified and alone. Now she had a job, a home, and the beginning of a new life. She prepared for bed, banking the fire so it would last through the night, and climbed under the quilts. Through the window, she could see stars scattered across the black sky, more stars than she had ever seen in Boston, where city lights dimmed the heavens. The vastness was both frightening and exhilarating. Fear has no place with me. Logan's words came back to her again, and Helena found herself believing them. She was safe here. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with courage. The weeks that followed established a routine that Helena found surprisingly satisfying. She woke before dawn each morning, dressed quickly in the cold darkness, and walked across to the main house to begin breakfast. The men ate hearty portions of eggs, bacon, fried potatoes, biscuits, and gravy before heading out to their various tasks. Helena spent the morning hours cleaning, doing laundry, or preparing the midday meal. Afternoons were devoted to mending, baking, and supper preparations. By evening, she was exhausted but content in the way that comes from productive labor. Logan was an ideal employer. He treated her with unfailing courtesy, never making excessive demands and always expressing appreciation for her work. He kept his promise about her privacy, never entering her cabin uninvited and ensuring his men did the same. When Helena needed to visit town for any reason, he either drove her himself or sent one of the men with the wagon. The ranch hands were equally respectful. Thomas became something of a protective older brother, always checking to make sure she had enough firewood or needed any repairs. Daniel made her laugh with his jokes and stories. James was quieter but equally kind, often bringing her flowers from the desert when he found them blooming in sheltered spots. Samuel treated her with an almost worshipful admiration that was endearing if slightly uncomfortable. As Christmas approached, Helena found herself more content than she had been in years. The work was hard but meaningful. She enjoyed creating a comfortable home, taking pride in the improvements she made to the house. She had washed all the curtains, scrubbed every corner, organized the kitchen to maximum efficiency, and added small touches that made the space more welcoming. A tablecloth she had embroidered, fresh flowers when she could find them, books arranged neatly in the bookcase. Logan noticed these changes and commented on them. "The house has not felt this much like a home since my mother died," he told her one evening as she served supper. "You have a gift for this, Miss Zimmerman. I am glad you are pleased, Mr. Irwin." They maintained this formal mode of address, keeping proper distance between employer and employee. But Helena could not help noticing things about Logan that had nothing to do with their professional relationship. The way he laughed at Daniel's jokes, throwing his head back with genuine mirth. The gentleness with which he handled horses, speaking to them in low tones. The fairness with which he treated his men, never asking them to do anything he would not do himself. The way his eyes softened when he looked at her, a warmth that made her heart beat faster. She tried to suppress these feelings. Logan had made it clear he was not looking for romance, and Helena had told him the same thing. But awareness grew despite her best efforts, and she found herself looking forward to the moments when they worked together, when conversation flowed easily and laughter came naturally. 2 days before Christmas, Logan announced that he needed to go to Fort Bowie for supplies and asked if Helena would like to accompany him. "I could use some things from the general store," Helena said, "and I would like to attend church services on Christmas Eve if possible." "We can arrange that. We will leave early tomorrow and stay overnight at the hotel. I have some business to attend to that will take most of the day, so you will have time for shopping and visiting." They set out the next morning under clear skies, the wagon loaded with items Logan planned to sell or trade. The ride to town was pleasant despite the cold. Helena had grown accustomed to the desert landscape and found herself appreciating its stark beauty. Logan pointed out a small herd of pronghorn antelope grazing on a distant hillside, and later they saw a coyote watching them from a rock outcropping. "You ever miss Boston?" Logan asked. Helena considered the question. "I miss my family terribly. There are days when I wake up and forget they are gone, and the remembering hurts all over again. But the city itself? No, I do not miss it. The factory was horrible, the boarding house was depressing, and I had no real friends there. Everything good about my life in Boston died with my parents." "I am sorry you lost them so young." "I am sorry you lost your parents as well. At least I had mine into adulthood. You were still practically a boy when your mother died." 23 felt old at the time, Logan said with a slight smile. "But you are right, I was young. My father taught me ranching, but my mother taught me how to be a decent human being. I try to live up to her example." "I think you do. She would be proud of the man you have become." Logan looked at her with an expression that made Helena's breath catch. For a moment, something passed between them, an understanding deeper than words. Then he looked away, focusing on the road ahead. Fort Bowie was busy with people doing Christmas shopping. Logan helped Helena down from the wagon and escorted her to the general store, where he made arrangements to meet her in 2 hours. Helena spent the time browsing the store's offerings and making a few modest purchases. Fabric for a new dress, thread, buttons, peppermint sticks as Christmas treats for the ranch hands, and a book of poems she thought Logan might enjoy. She had saved most of her wages, needing little for herself at the ranch, and it felt good to buy gifts for others. She also encountered Mrs. Patterson on the street and accepted an invitation to have tea at the hotel. The older woman was full of news about town happenings and clearly delighted to pump Helena for information about life at the ranch. "So how are you getting along with Logan and his men?" Mrs. Patterson asked over teacups. "Very well. They are all gentlemen, and Mr. Irwin is an excellent employer. Logan has always been a good man. Half the single women in Fort Bowie have set their caps at him over the years, but he has never shown interest in any of them." Mrs. Patterson gave Helena a meaningful look. "He keeps to himself mostly, focused on his ranch." Helena understood the unspoken question. "Mr. Irwin and I have a professional relationship, nothing more. He hired me as his housekeeper." Of course. Mrs. Patterson did not sound convinced. "Still, you are a lovely young woman and Logan is a fine-looking man. You spend a lot of time together. Things happen." "Mrs. Patterson, I assure you, Mr. Irwin has been completely proper. He has never said or done anything inappropriate. That is Logan, proper to a fault." "But I have eyes, girl. I saw how he looked at you when he brought you here that first night. That was not the look of a man thinking about hiring a housekeeper." Helena felt her cheeks warm. "You are imagining things. Maybe, maybe not." Mrs. Patterson poured more tea. "Just do not be too stubborn to see what is right in front of you, if it happens to develop into something more." Helena changed the subject, and the conversation moved to safer topics. But Mrs. Patterson's words stayed with her. Did Logan look at her differently? She had not imagined the warmth in his eyes, the way he found excuses to spend time with her, the small kindnesses that went beyond what an employer owed an employee. She met Logan at the appointed time, and they checked into the hotel for the night. Separate rooms, of course, properly distant from each other. They had supper in the restaurant, and Logan told her about his business dealings of the day. He had sold a dozen head of cattle to a buyer and arranged for spring delivery of additional stock. He seemed pleased with the transactions. "The ranch is doing well," he said. "Better than it has in years. Part of that is good cattle prices, but part of it is having you managing the household. When I was trying to do everything myself, things fell through the cracks. Now I can focus on ranch business knowing everything else is handled." "I am glad I can contribute," Helena said. "You gave me this opportunity when I desperately needed it. I want to do my best." "You exceed expectations, Miss Zimmerman. Every day." The way he said it, his blue eyes holding hers across the table, made Helena's heart race. She looked down at her plate, confused by the intensity of her feelings. She had known this man for less than a month, yet she felt more connected to him than she had to Gerald Hutchins after months of correspondence. Christmas Eve dawned cold but beautiful. Logan and Helena attended services at the small Fort Bowie church, sitting together in a pew near the back. The church was packed with townsfolk and soldiers from the nearby fort, everyone dressed in their best clothes. The minister spoke about hope and new beginnings, and Helena felt tears prick her eyes. She had been so frightened when she arrived in Fort Bowie, certain her life was ruined. Now she had hope again, and a future. After the service, they walked back to the hotel through streets decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons. Fort Bowie looked festive and welcoming. Several people greeted Logan by name, and he introduced Helena to those she had not met. She felt their curious gazes and knew they were speculating about her relationship with Logan, but she held her head high as Mrs. Patterson had advised. They began the journey back to the ranch after lunch, the wagon laden with supplies and Christmas provisions. Helena had purchased a goose for Christmas dinner, along with ingredients for all the traditional dishes. She planned to make the day special for Logan and his men. As they drove through the desert afternoon, Logan suddenly pulled the wagon to a stop and pointed. "Look there on that ridge." Helena followed his gaze and gasped. A small herd of wild horses stood silhouetted against the sky, their manes and tails streaming in the wind. They were magnificent, embodying the freedom and wildness of this land. "They are beautiful," Helena breathed. "I never get tired of seeing them," Logan said. "Every time I think about how hard ranch life can be, I see something like that and remember why I love this country." They watched until the horses moved off, disappearing over the ridge. As Logan urged the draft horses forward again, Helena thought about his words. She was beginning to understand what he meant. This land was harsh and demanding, but it had a beauty and honesty that the crowded cities lacked. Here, life was stripped to essentials: work, survival, and the connections between people who depended on each other. Christmas Day was everything Helena hoped it would be. She woke early and prepared a feast: roasted goose with sage dressing, mashed potatoes, gravy, roasted carrots and turnips, fresh bread, cranberry sauce from canned berries, and 3 different pies for dessert. The men gathered for dinner in the afternoon, and Helena had decorated the main room with evergreen branches and red ribbons. Logan gave each of his men a bonus in their Christmas pay envelopes, and the men had pooled their resources to buy Helena a beautiful shawl from the general store. She was touched by the thoughtfulness. She distributed the peppermint sticks she had bought and gave each man a pair of socks she had knitted in the evenings. Logan she saved for last. She handed him a wrapped package, feeling suddenly shy. "I hope you do not already have this." He unwrapped it carefully and smiled when he saw the book of poems. "I do not have this collection. Thank you, Miss Zimmerman. This is very thoughtful." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I have something for you as well." Inside the box was a beautiful brooch made of silver with turquoise stones, clearly of Native American craftsmanship. Helena caught her breath. "Mr. Irwin, this is too much. It is a Christmas gift, nothing more. I saw it at the trading post and thought of you. The silver and turquoise are traditional in this region. I thought you might like a piece of the Southwest to keep." Helena pinned the brooch to her dress, touched by his thoughtfulness. "I will treasure it, thank you." The rest of the day passed in pleasant relaxation. The men played cards and told stories while Helena sat in the armchair knitting and listening to their conversation. Logan read from his new book of poems, his deep voice giving life to the verses. As evening fell and the men retired to the bunkhouse, Helena felt a profound contentment. This was what family felt like, what home felt like. She helped Logan clear away the dishes, and they worked together in the warm kitchen, moving around each other with easy familiarity. When they finished, Logan walked her back to her cabin as he always did. "Miss Zimmerman," he said as they stood outside her door, "this has been the best Christmas I have had in years. Thank you for making it special." "You are welcome, Mr. Irwin. Thank you for the beautiful brooch and for giving me a place here." They stood looking at each other in the starlight, and Helena felt the air between them charged with possibility. Logan lifted his hand as if to touch her face, then caught himself and dropped it. "Good night," he said quietly. "Good night." Helena went inside, closing the door and leaning against it. Her heart was pounding. She had wanted him to touch her, had wanted him to kiss her. This was becoming complicated in ways she had not anticipated. The winter deepened, bringing storms that sometimes lasted for days. During these times, Helena could not return to her cabin and slept instead in one of the spare bedrooms in the main house. Logan was scrupulous about propriety, never being alone with her in ways that could cause gossip, but Helena felt the growing tension between them. They were falling in love, she realized. It happened in small moments. The way Logan smiled when he came in from the cold and found hot coffee waiting, the way Helena's pulse quickened when she heard his voice, the long conversations they had in the evenings after the men retired, the brush of hands when passing dishes at table. January brought a series of brutal storms. One evening, as snow fell heavily outside, Helena and Logan sat by the fire in the main room. The ranch hands had gone to the bunkhouse early, and they were alone. "Miss Zimmerman," Logan said finally, setting down the book he had been pretending to read, "we need to talk." Helena's heart jumped. She set aside her mending. "About what, Mr. Irwin? About this?" He gestured between them. "About the fact that I cannot stop thinking about you. About how every time you walk into a room, everything feels brighter. About how I find excuses to spend time with you even though I know I should not. Mr. Irwin." "Logan. Please call me Logan. We have been dancing around this for weeks now, and I cannot do it anymore. I know I said this was just a professional arrangement and I meant it at the time, but things have changed. I have changed." He ran a hand through his hair, agitated. "Helena, I am falling in love with you." Helena's breath caught. Hearing him say it, hearing her given name on his lips made everything real. "Logan, She stopped, gathering courage. "I am falling in love with you too. I have been for weeks. I tried to stop it, but I cannot help how I feel." Relief flooded Logan's face. He crossed to where she sat and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "I was afraid you did not feel the same. I was afraid I was just your employer and nothing more. You are so much more than that." Helena touched his face gently, marveling at the permission to do so. "You are kind and honorable and strong. You gave me hope when I had none. How could I not fall in love with you?" Logan turned his face to kiss her palm, then looked up at her with those remarkable blue eyes. "I want to court you properly. I want to ask you to marry me, but I know this is sudden." You have only been here 2 months. I do not want to pressure you or make you feel obligated because I employ you. Logan, when I came here, I was prepared to marry Gerald Hutchins after only exchanging letters. I have lived with you, worked beside you, gotten to know your character. There is no comparison. I know you, truly know you in ways I never knew him. Then you would be willing to consider courtship, eventually marriage if things continue as I hope they will. Yes, Helena said simply. Yes to all of it. Logan stood and drew her to her feet, then into his arms. They held each other for a long moment, and Helena felt like she was finally where she belonged. When Logan tilted her face up and kissed her, it was gentle and sweet and full of promise. I will do this right, Logan murmured against her hair. I will court you properly, with the whole town knowing my intentions. We will wait a suitable time before marrying. I want everyone to know that you are choosing me freely, not because you need a job or security. Logan, I do choose you freely. You are the best man I have ever known. They spent the evening talking, making plans, imagining their future together. The storm raged outside, but inside they were warm and happy and in love. The next morning, Logan announced their courtship to his ranch hands. The men were delighted, congratulating them both and making good-natured jokes about how they had seen this coming for weeks. When Logan took Helena to Fort Bowie the following Sunday and announced their engagement to the town, reactions were mixed. Most people were happy for them, but there were a few raised eyebrows and whispered comments about hasty decisions. Mrs. Patterson was thrilled. I knew it, she told Helena triumphantly. I told you that man looked at you differently. When is the wedding? Late spring, Helena said. We want to give it enough time that no one can say I married him out of desperation. Smart girl. Though anyone with eyes can see you are in love. The courtship period was simultaneously wonderful and frustrating. Logan was determined to be proper, which meant no more kisses beyond chaste pecks, no being alone together beyond what was necessary for household management, and certainly nothing that could compromise Helena's reputation. She moved back to her cabin, and Logan instituted strict protocols about chaperones and appropriate behavior. I know it seems old-fashioned, Logan told her when she complained about the restrictions, but I want to protect your reputation. I want everyone to respect you as my wife, not whisper that I seduced my housekeeper. Helena understood his reasoning, but she missed the easy intimacy they had shared before declaring their feelings. Still, there were compensations. Logan was a devoted suitor, bringing her wildflowers, reading poetry to her in the evenings with the ranch hands serving as chaperones, taking her on drives through the countryside on Sunday afternoons. In March, the spring roundup began. The ranch came alive with activity as Logan and his men worked from dawn to dusk gathering cattle, branding new calves, and preparing the herd for market. Additional cowboys were hired temporarily, which meant Helena was cooking for 10 men instead of 5. It was exhausting work, but she thrived on the challenge. Logan was in his element during Roundup, demonstrating the skills that made him a successful rancher. Helena watched him work with the horses and cattle, admiring his competence and strength. The other men clearly respected him, following his orders without question. One afternoon in late March, Helena was in the kitchen preparing supper when she heard shouting from the yard. She ran to the door and saw Logan being carried toward the house by Thomas and Daniel. Her heart stopped. "What happened?" she demanded, rushing to them. "Horse threw him," Thomas said grimly. "He hit his head on a rock. He has been unconscious for a few minutes." They carried Logan to his bedroom and laid him on the bed. Helena pushed past them and felt for a pulse. It was strong and steady. A gash on his forehead bled freely and a large knot was forming. "Get water and clean cloth," she ordered, falling into the calm efficiency she had learned nursing her family. "Thomas, ride to town and fetch the doctor. Daniel, tell the other men what happened." She cleaned the wound gently, relieved when Logan's eyes fluttered open. "Helena!" His voice was confused. "I am here. You hit your head. Lie still." "My head hurts like hell." He tried to sit up. "Do not move." She pressed a clean cloth to the still bleeding gash. "The doctor is coming." Logan submitted to her care, though she could see he hated being helpless. The doctor arrived 2 hours later and examined Logan thoroughly. The verdict was a concussion and several stitches for the gash, but nothing more serious. Logan was ordered to rest for 3 days, which he protested strenuously. "I cannot stay in bed for 3 days. It is roundup season." "Thomas can manage," Helena said firmly. "You are staying in bed where I can watch you." For the next 3 days, Helena barely left Logan's side. She brought him meals, changed his bandages, and refused to let him get up except for necessary purposes. Logan grumbled but secretly seemed to enjoy the attention. On the 3rd day, when the doctor declared him recovered enough to resume light duties, Helena felt weak with relief. "You frightened me," she told him as they sat together in his room, properly chaperoned by Daniel, who dozed in a chair by the door. "I thought I was going to lose you." Logan took her hand, threading their fingers together. "I am fine, Helena. I have survived worse than a tumble from a horse. But I will admit, having you take care of me made being laid up almost worthwhile." "Do not even joke about that. Promise me you will be more careful." "I promise to do my best. But ranching is dangerous work, sweetheart. There will always be risks." It was the first time he had used an endearment, and Helena felt warmth spread through her chest. "Then I will just have to make sure you always have a reason to come home safe." "You are reason enough," Logan said seriously. "You are everything I never knew I needed." As April bloomed across the high desert, bringing warmth and wildflowers, Helena and Logan finalized their wedding plans. They would marry on May 15th, a Saturday, in the Fort Bowie church. Mrs. Patterson volunteered to make the wedding cake, and several women in town offered to help with decorations and food for the reception. Helena sewed her own wedding dress from white muslin she had purchased, working on it in the evenings by lamplight. It was simple but elegant, with lace trim at the collar and cuffs. Logan surprised her one evening in late April by presenting her with a beautiful wedding ring. "It was my grandmother's," he explained. "My father gave it to my mother when they married, and she gave it to me before she died. She told me to give it to the woman I loved when I was ready to marry. I want you to have it, Helena. I want you to be part of my family, connected to the people who came before us." Helena slipped the gold band onto her finger, moved by the significance of the gesture. "I will wear it with honor. Thank you for sharing your family with me. You are my family now, you and whatever children we are blessed with. I am going to spend the rest of my life making you happy, Helena. That is my promise to you." The weeks before the wedding passed in a blur of preparations and anticipation. Helena moved through her days in a haze of happiness, hardly believing her good fortune. She had arrived in Fort Bowie 6 months ago, terrified and alone, and now she was about to marry a man she loved deeply, a man who loved her in return. May 15th, 1884 dawned clear and beautiful, with warm sunshine and a gentle breeze. Helena woke in her cabin and dressed carefully in her wedding gown. Mrs. Patterson arrived early to help with her hair, styling it in an elegant upswept arrangement with small white flowers tucked among the curls. "You look beautiful," Mrs. Patterson said, tears in her eyes. "Logan is a lucky man." "I am the lucky one," Helena replied. "He gave me a new life when I needed it most." The ceremony was set for 2 o'clock. Thomas drove Helena to town in the ranch wagon, which had been decorated with ribbons and flowers. The church was packed with townspeople, soldiers from the fort, neighboring ranchers, and everyone from the Double Bar I Ranch. Logan stood at the altar in a new suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his blue eyes fixed on the door. When Helena walked down the aisle on Thomas's arm, she saw Logan's face transform with joy and love. She felt answering emotions rise in her own chest, so powerful she could barely breathe. This man, this wonderful man, was about to become her husband. The minister spoke the traditional words, but Helena barely heard them. She was lost in Logan's eyes, seeing her entire future reflected there. When it came time for vows, Logan's voice was strong and sure. I, Logan Matthew Irwin, take you, Helena Rose Zimmerman, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, protect you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. In sickness and in health, in plenty and in want, in joy and in sorrow, I will be yours completely. Helena's voice trembled with emotion as she spoke her own vows. I, Helena Rose Zimmerman, take you, Logan Matthew Irwin, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, support you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. You gave me hope when I had none, and I will spend my life being worthy of that gift. Logan slipped his grandmother's ring onto her finger, and the minister pronounced them husband and wife. When Logan kissed her, the church erupted in cheers and applause. The reception was held at the hotel, with food and music and dancing. Helena had never been so happy. She danced with Logan, with his ranch hands, with townspeople who had become friends. Everyone toasted the happy couple and wished them well. As evening approached, Logan and Helena prepared to return to the ranch. They said goodbye to their guests and climbed into the wagon, now festooned with tin cans and old boots tied by well-meaning friends. The noise followed them out of town, and they laughed together at the absurdity of it. The ride home was quiet and peaceful. Helena sat close to Logan on the wagon seat, his arm around her shoulders. The sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of gold and rose. "Are you happy?" Logan asked. "Happier than I have ever been," Helena said honestly. "I keep thinking about how frightened I was when I stepped off that train last December. I thought my life was over. Instead, it was just beginning." "Fear has no place with me," Logan said, echoing his words from that first night. "I meant that then, and I mean it now. As long as I am alive, Helena, you will never have to be afraid. You will always be loved and protected and cherished. I know. That is why I love you so completely." They arrived at the ranch as twilight deepened. Logan helped Helena down from the wagon and swept her into his arms, carrying her across the threshold of the main house. Their house now, Helena thought with joy. Their home. Logan set her down gently and cupped her face in his hands. "I love you, Mrs. Irwin. I love you, Mr. Irwin." They kissed, and this time there was no need for restraint or propriety. They were married, bound together legally and spiritually. Logan carried Helena to the bedroom they would now share, and they spent their wedding night discovering the joy and passion of married love. The months that followed were filled with happiness. Helena settled into her role as Logan's wife with joy, managing the household and supporting him in his ranch work. They developed routines and rhythms, learning each other's habits and preferences. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Logan focused on the cattle and land operations while Helena ran the domestic side with efficiency and care. In August, Helena realized she was pregnant. She told Logan one evening after supper, watching his face light up with wonder and delight. "A baby." He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break. "Helena, that is wonderful news. Are you feeling all right? Should you be working so hard?" "I am perfectly fine. Pregnancy is not an illness, Logan. I can continue my normal activities for months yet." But Logan became protective, insisting she rest more and asking the ranch hands to take on additional chores to lighten her load. Helena found his concern endearing even when it became excessive. She had never felt so loved and cared for. The winter of 1884 was mild compared to the previous year. Helena continued to manage the household through her pregnancy, though Logan hired a young woman from town to help with the heavier work as Helena grew larger. By March, she was enormous and uncomfortable, ready for the baby to arrive. On March 22, 1885, Helena went into labor. Logan sent for the doctor and Mrs. Patterson, then paced the main room like a caged animal while Helena labored in their bedroom. The birth was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next afternoon. Logan refused to leave the house, staying close in case Helena needed him. Finally, just after 2 o'clock on March 23rd, the cry of a newborn filled the house. Logan burst into the bedroom to find Helena exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle. "We have a son," she said softly. Logan approached the bed with wonder, looking down at his child for the first time. The baby was red-faced and wrinkled with a shock of dark hair. Logan touched one tiny hand and the baby's fingers curled around his. "He is perfect," Logan whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you, Helena. Thank you for this gift." They named him Matthew Thomas Irwin, after Logan's father and their foreman. Little Matthew was a healthy, happy baby who brought endless joy to the ranch. The Cowboys doted on him, and Thomas in particular developed a special bond with his namesake. Life settled into a new rhythm with the baby. Helena managed motherhood and household responsibilities with the same efficiency she brought to everything. Logan was a devoted father, spending every possible moment with his son. In the evenings, he would sit with Matthew in the rocking chair Helena's mother had made, singing lullabies in his deep voice while Helena sewed or read nearby. The ranch continued to prosper. Logan made smart business decisions, expanding their cattle operations and improving their breeding stock. By their second anniversary, the Double Bar I Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the territory. They hired additional help, including a permanent housekeeper to assist Helena, which allowed her more time with Matthew and more involvement in ranch business decisions. Helena discovered she had a good head for business. She took over the ranch's bookkeeping and correspondence, negotiating contracts with buyers and suppliers. Logan valued her input, often discussing major decisions with her before implementing them. They were true partners in every sense. In the summer of 1886, Helena became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, and on February 8, 1887, she gave birth to a daughter. They named her Rose Catherine Irwin, after Helena's mother and Logan's mother. Rose was a beautiful baby with her father's blue eyes and her mother's delicate features. Matthew, now almost 2 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister. He would sit beside her cradle for hours, watching her sleep and trying to make her smile. Logan and Helena watched their children together, marveling at the family they had created. "Did you ever imagine this?" Helena asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset. Matthew was playing in the yard under Thomas's watchful eye, and Rose slept in her cradle nearby. "Not specifically," Logan admitted, "but I always hoped for it. A wife I loved, children, a successful ranch, a real home. You gave me all of that, Helena. You are everything." "You gave me all of it too," Helena said, leaning against his shoulder. "I think about that day I stepped off the train in Fort Bowie, so frightened and alone. If Gerald Hutchins had lived, I would have married him and probably been reasonably content. But I would never have known this kind of happiness." I would never have known what it feels like to be completely, deeply loved. Do you ever regret it? Coming west, I mean. Do you miss Boston? Helena shook her head. Never. This is my home. You are my home. This wild, beautiful land, our children, our life together. This is everything I never knew I wanted. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and celebrations. Matthew grew into a sturdy, curious boy who followed his father everywhere, learning ranching from the time he could walk. Rose was a bright, spirited little girl who could charm everyone she met. In 1889, Helena gave birth to another son, Joseph Daniel, named after Logan's grandfather and their blacksmith friend. In 1891, a second daughter arrived, Emma Jane, completing their family. The Double Bar I Ranch became known throughout Arizona Territory as one of the finest operations, due to the combined efforts of Logan and Helena. They expanded their holdings, bought better breeding stock, and implemented innovative water management techniques. Logan's reputation for honesty and fair dealing made him a respected figure in the ranching community. Helena became involved in community affairs, helping establish a school in Fort Bowie and serving on the church committee. She taught her daughters fine needlework and her sons to read and write. The cabin she had first lived in became a guest house for visiting family and friends. Thomas eventually married his sweetheart, a widow from town named Sarah, and Logan gave them a portion of ranch land to build their own small place. Daniel saved enough money to open his blacksmith shop in Fort Bowie, though he continued to do work for the ranch. James became Logan's foreman after Thomas moved to his own property. Samuel eventually drifted on to other adventures, but he visited regularly and was always welcomed warmly. On a warm evening in May of 1894, Logan and Helena celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary with a party at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from miles around to celebrate with them. The house was full of laughter and music. The children ran wild with their friends, drunk on cake and excitement. As the party wound down and guests began to depart, Logan and Helena slipped away to their favorite spot on the hill behind the house. They sat together on a blanket, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. 10 years, Helena said softly. It has gone so fast. The best 10 years of my life, Logan replied. He put his arm around her and she leaned into his embrace. Do you remember what I said to you that first night? Fear has no place with me. I remember every word you said that night. You saved me, Logan. You gave me everything. We saved each other, Logan corrected. I was alone here, running this ranch by myself, no real purpose beyond survival. You gave me a reason for all of it. You gave me love and family and a future worth building. Helena tilted her face up to kiss him. I love you. I will always love you. And I love you, forever and always. They sat together as night deepened, holding each other and watching their ranch settle into peaceful darkness. The house lights glowed warm and welcoming. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed softly. A coyote called, its voice echoing across the high desert. Helena thought about the frightened young woman who had stepped off the train in Fort Bowie 10.5 years ago, terrified of winter and the unknown future. That woman could never have imagined this. A loving husband, 4 beautiful children, a successful ranch, deep friendships, and a life filled with purpose and joy. She had arrived in Arizona with nothing but fear and a worn carpetbag. She had found everything that mattered. Logan's words had proven true in ways neither of them could have predicted. Fear truly had no place with him. In his arms, in this life they had built together, there was only love and hope and the infinite possibilities of their shared future. As they walked back to the house hand in hand, Helena felt complete contentment. This was home. This was family. This was love in its truest form, tested, proven, and growing stronger with each passing year. The years continued to unfold with joy and occasional challenges. The children grew and thrived. Matthew showed a natural aptitude for ranching and became Logan's shadow, learning everything his father could teach him. Rose developed her mother's skill with needle and thread, creating beautiful embroidery that was the envy of the county. Joseph was the quietest of the children, preferring books to ranch work, and Helena nurtured his love of learning. Emma, the youngest, was fearless and wild, racing her pony across the desert and climbing trees with her brothers. In 1896, Arizona Territory was growing and changing. The railroad had brought more development to the area, and Fort Bowie was expanding into a proper town. Logan was approached by territorial officials about running for the legislature, but he declined. He had no interest in politics. His passion was the land and his family, and that was enough. Helena, now 35, remained as beautiful as the day Logan had first seen her, though life had added character to her face. Logan, at 43, had some gray in his dark hair, and the sun had deepened the lines around his eyes, but he was still strong and vital. Their love had matured from the passionate intensity of new romance into something deeper and more enduring, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and unwavering commitment. One evening, in the fall of 1897, Logan and Helena sat on their porch after the children had gone to bed. It was a ritual they maintained whenever possible, this quiet time together at the end of each day. "Matthew asked me today when he could officially work full-time on the ranch," Logan said. "He is only 14, but he does the work of a man already." "He idolizes you," Helena replied. "He wants to be exactly like his father. I want him to have the education I never had. James has been teaching him mathematics and reading, but I think we should consider sending him to school in Tucson for a year or two. He needs more than ranch knowledge. He would hate leaving the ranch." "Probably, but he would benefit from it. The world is changing, Helena. Our children need to be prepared for a future that might look very different from our present." They discussed their children's futures often, planning and dreaming. Rose had expressed interest in attending a finishing school for young ladies. Joseph wanted to go to university, perhaps to study law or medicine. Emma was still too young to have clear ambitions, though Helena suspected she would want something adventurous. The ranch had grown substantially over the years. They now ran over 2,000 head of cattle, employed a dozen men full-time, and owned water rights to several crucial springs. Logan had invested profits wisely, diversifying into horses and even some sheep, despite the traditional cattleman's disdain for the animals. The sheep proved profitable, and other ranchers eventually followed his lead. Helena had published several articles in agricultural journals about ranch management and the role of women in Western development. Her writing was well received, and she received correspondence from women all over the West seeking advice. She enjoyed this intellectual outlet, though her primary focus remained her family and the ranch. In 1899, as the century drew to a close, the Irwin family faced their most serious challenge. A drought hit Arizona Territory, the worst anyone could remember. Springs dried up, grass withered, and cattle began to die. Logan worked desperately to keep his herd alive, hauling water from the few sources that remained, culling the weakest animals, and moving cattle to any patch of grazing he could find. Helena managed the household on strict economy, preserving every possible resource. She also organized relief efforts for smaller ranchers who were hit even harder, using the Irwins' relative stability to help neighbors who had less. The drought lasted 14 months. By the time rain finally came in the summer of 1900, the Double Bar I Ranch had lost nearly a third of its cattle. Many neighboring ranches failed entirely, their owners forced to sell out and leave the territory. Logan was exhausted and discouraged. One evening, after surveying the damage to his herds, he sat on the porch with his head in his hands. Helena sat beside him and took his hand. "We survived," she said firmly. "We lost cattle, but we kept the ranch. We kept our family together. That is what matters." "I worked so hard to build this place up," Logan said, his voice rough with emotion, "to see so much of it lost. We will build it again. We have done it before. Logan, look at me." She waited until his blue eyes met hers. "We came through this together. Our marriage survived my arrival under terrible circumstances. It survived injury and illness and the normal challenges of life. It will survive this drought. We will rebuild and we will thrive again." Logan pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "What would I do without you?" "You will never have to find out. We are partners, remember, for better or worse. This is the worst part, but better is coming." Her confidence proved justified. With the return of the rains, grass grew again. Logan rebuilt his herds carefully, buying quality breeding stock rather than quantity. Within 3 years, the Double Bar I Ranch was back to its previous strength, and by 1905, it was more prosperous than ever. The children grew into young adults. Matthew stayed on the ranch, proving himself a capable manager. At 21, he married a rancher's daughter from Tucson, a sensible young woman named Alice who fit seamlessly into the family. Rose attended finishing school and then returned home, where she met and married a young Army officer stationed at Fort Bowie. Joseph fulfilled his dream of attending university, studying law in California. Emma, at 16, was still at home, still wild and fearless, the daughter who most resembled her father in temperament. On May 15, 1909, Logan and Helena celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. The ranch threw a massive celebration, with people coming from all over the territory. The governor himself sent a congratulatory letter. Logan and Helena stood together, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. Matthew and Alice had given them 2 grandsons, and felt overwhelmed by their blessings. That evening, after everyone else had retired, Logan and Helena walked out to their special spot on the hill. It was a tradition now, coming here for significant moments and quiet conversations. 25 years, Logan marveled. A quarter century. We are getting old, Helena. Speak for yourself, Helena said with a laugh. She was 47 now, her hair showing silver threads, but still beautiful in Logan's eyes. "I feel like we are just hitting our stride. Do you remember being that terrified young woman on the train platform? Sometimes it seems like yesterday. Other times it feels like a different lifetime, like that was someone else entirely." Helena leaned against Logan's shoulder. "I was so afraid that night. Everything had gone wrong and I thought I would end up destitute or worse. Instead you found me," Logan said. "Instead I found you. Or you found me. Either way, it was the most fortunate thing that ever happened to both of us." Logan kissed the top of her head. "I told you fear had no place with me. I think we proved that true. We did. We built a life and a legacy. Our children are thriving. The ranch is successful. We have love and purpose and meaning. What more could anyone ask for?" They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge one by one. The desert night was warm and peaceful. In the distance, they could hear music and laughter from the ranch buildings where the celebration was still winding down. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Gerald Hutchins had lived?" Logan asked. Helena considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. I think I would have married him and probably had a decent life, but it would have been nothing like this." I would never have known this kind of love, this deep partnership. I would never have known you. So while I am sorry he died, I cannot regret the circumstances that brought us together. Nor can I, though I try to live in a way that would make him forgive me for benefiting from his misfortune. You do. You have given me and our children everything. You have been a good steward of this land, a fair employer, a respected member of the community. If Gerald's spirit is watching, I think he is pleased with how things turned out. The years continued to pass, marked by both joys and sorrows. In 1912, Rose's husband was transferred to another post, and she moved away with him and their children. The house seemed emptier without her laughter. Joseph established a successful law practice in Phoenix and married a fellow lawyer, a brilliant woman who shared his intellectual interests. Emma finally settled down at 21, marrying a neighboring rancher's son and establishing her own spread adjacent to the Double Bar Eye. In 1914, Logan celebrated his 61st birthday. He was still strong and active, still running the ranch with Matthew's help, but Helena noticed he tired more easily. She worried about him but said nothing, knowing he would dismiss her concerns. Then came the war in Europe. Joseph enlisted despite being over 30 and having a family, feeling a duty to serve. Helena and Logan spent anxious months worrying about their son, reading newspaper reports and praying for his safety. When Joseph returned in 1919, wounded but alive, their relief was overwhelming. The 1920s brought more changes. Arizona achieved statehood, automobiles became common, and the modern world encroached even on remote ranches. Logan adapted more slowly than Helena to these changes, preferring the old ways of horses and hard work. But he was smart enough to adopt new techniques when they proved useful. On December 15, 1923, Helena woke early and looked out the window at a landscape dusted with fresh snow. Fort Bowie had grown into a substantial town now, with paved streets and electric lights. The ranch had modern conveniences: electricity, telephone lines, even a motor car Logan had bought reluctantly at Helena's insistence. She dressed and went to the kitchen to start breakfast, a routine maintained over 40 years despite employing a full-time cook now. Logan found her there, standing at the window and watching the sunrise. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "That day I arrived at the train station. It was December, just like now. Everything was frozen and I was so frightened. I had never felt so alone in my life." She turned in his arms to face him. "And then you caught me when I slipped on the ice, and everything changed." Logan smiled, his face lined with age now, but his blue eyes still clear and bright. "Best thing that ever happened to me, catching you that day. We have had a good life, Logan. The best, because we lived it together." They stood holding each other as light filled the kitchen, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something extraordinary. Matthew and his family now managed most of the daily ranch operations, allowing Logan and Helena to step back somewhat. They were grandparents multiple times over, with grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren scattered across Arizona and beyond. The Double Bar Eye Ranch remained successful, a legacy they would pass down through generations. On their 40th wedding anniversary, in May of 1924, the family threw another massive celebration. Logan and Helena stood together surrounded by the fruits of their union: 4 living children, 12 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. The ranch sprawled across 15,000 acres now, a testament to their hard work and wise management. As the party ended and evening approached, Logan and Helena walked once more to their special place on the hill. They moved more slowly now, Logan with a cane after a fall 2 years prior, but they still made the journey. 40 years, Helena said softly. How did that happen so quickly? Time moves fast when you are happy, Logan replied. He sat carefully on the blanket Helena had brought and she settled beside him. Helena, I want you to know something. Every single day for 40 years, I have thanked God for bringing you into my life. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. And you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You saved my life, Logan, in every way a person can be saved. You gave me hope, purpose, love, family, a home. You gave me everything. Logan took her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. Fear has no place with me. That is what I told you that first night. Do you still believe it? I have never doubted it for a moment. With you, I have always been safe. I have always been loved. You kept that promise every day of our marriage. They sat together watching the sun set over the land they loved, the land they had worked together for 4 decades. The ranch spread below them, peaceful and prosperous. Somewhere in the buildings, their family was gathered, the legacy they had created together. I love you, Helena Rose Irwin, Logan said. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Logan Matthew Irwin, forever and always. As twilight descended and stars began to emerge, they sat close together, hands intertwined, hearts beating in synchronized rhythm. 2 people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a love story that would be told by their descendants for generations to come. Helena thought about that frightened young woman who had stepped off the train in Fort Bowie so many years ago, and she wanted to tell her, do not be afraid. Everything will work out better than you ever imagined. A cowboy will catch you when you fall, and he will keep catching you for the rest of your life. He will tell you that fear has no place with him, and he will prove it every single day. That cowboy became her husband, her partner, her great love. Together they had built not just a successful ranch but a family, a legacy, and a love story for the ages. The mail-order bride who stepped into winter with fear had found a cowboy who kept his promise. In his arms, she discovered that love could conquer fear, that home was not a place but a person, and that the best adventures often began with the courage to step into the unknown. As the years wound down and Logan and Helena moved into their 70s, their love only deepened. They had weathered every storm together, celebrated every triumph together, and built a life of meaning and purpose together. The Double Bar I Ranch would continue for generations, but more importantly, their descendants would carry forward the lessons Logan and Helena had lived. That love requires courage. That commitment means keeping promises even when it is hard. That partnership means facing life's challenges side by side. On a warm spring morning in 1932, Logan and Helena sat on their porch watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard. They were in their late 70s now, their bodies slower but their minds still sharp, their love for each other as strong as ever. We did well, didn't we? Logan said softly. Helena squeezed his hand. We did better than well. We built something beautiful, something lasting. All because you were brave enough to step off that train and I was lucky enough to be there to catch you. Helena smiled. All because you promised that fear had no place with you, and you spent the rest of your life proving it. They sat together in the sunshine, surrounded by the evidence of their love. Children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, a thriving ranch, a community they had helped build. 2 people who had found each other in the most unlikely way and created an extraordinary life together. The mail-order bride and the cowboy had written a love story that would endure long after they were gone, a testament to the power of courage, commitment, and the transformative nature of true love. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy of all.